What if I told you that in a single drop of water resting on a leaf, there exists a world as complex and wondrous as any rainforest or coral reef? What if that tiny sphere of liquid held thousands of living creatures, each with their own way of moving, feeding, and surviving? Right now, all around you, invisible to your eyes, entire ecosystems are thriving in the smallest of spaces. You walk past them every day without knowing. But tonight, you and I are going to change that. We are going to shrink ourselves down and enter a realm that will forever change how you see the world. Are you ready to discover the universe in a drop of water? Before we begin our journey, let us pause for a moment and consider scale. You live in a world measured in meters and kilometers, where you can see mountains on the horizon and birds flying overhead. But there exists another world, one that operates at a scale so small that your eyes simply cannot perceive it. This is the world of the micron, where a single millimeter is a vast distance, and where creatures navigate through liquid landscapes using methods that seem almost magical. Tonight, we invite you to leave behind everything you think you know about size and enter this hidden dimension. The water that flows from your tap, that collects in puddles after rain, that clings to blades of grass in the morning dew, all of it teems with life. Invisible life. Beautiful life. For most of human history, we had no idea this microscopic world existed. We drank water without seeing its inhabitants. We bathed in ponds filled with countless living organisms. We were giants walking through kingdoms we could not perceive. Then, in the late 1600s, a Dutch merchant named Antony van Leeuwenhoek ground pieces of glass into tiny lenses and peered through them at ordinary water. So, what he saw astonished him. He called them animalcules, little animals. And in that moment, humanity realized that we shared our planet with an entire domain of life that had been completely unknown. That sense of discovery, that shock of recognition, is what we seek to recapture tonight. When you finish this journey, you will never look at water the same way again. Think about this for a moment. Every time you touch water, you are touching an entire world. When you wash your hands, when you swim in a lake, when you walk through morning dew, you are moving through civilizations of microscopic beings. They do not know you exist, just as for so long you did not know they existed. This is not science fiction. This is not imagination. This is reality. And the truly remarkable thing is that you do not need expensive equipment to witness it. A simple microscope, the kind a student might use, is enough to reveal wonders that rival anything you might see through the most powerful telescope pointed at distant galaxies. The extraordinary is not always far away. Sometimes, the most incredible discoveries are right here, in the palm of your hand, in a single drop of water. Our journey tonight will take us through a complete ecosystem, one that exists in a volume smaller than a grain of rice. We will meet the gentle giants of this realm, creatures that move with purpose and grace through their liquid universe. We will witness feeding strategies that have evolved over billions of years, perfected in the crucible of natural selection. We will see beauty in forms so alien they might as well be from another planet. And through it all, we will maintain a sense of calm and wonder, allowing these tiny lives to unfold at their own pace, in their own time. There is no rush here. In the microscopic world, time moves differently. A single day in the life of an amoeba can contain as much drama and survival as any epic tale. What makes this microscopic world so perfect for contemplation is its pace. Unlike the frenetic speed of modern life, these creatures move slowly and deliberately. An amoeba extending its pseudopod to engulf a bacterium does so with a kind of liquid grace that is mesmerizing to watch. A rotifer spinning in place, its corona of cilia creating gentle currents in the water, performs a dance that has remained unchanged for hundreds of millions of years. There is something deeply peaceful about observing life at this scale. It reminds us that existence does not always have to be rushed, that there is profound beauty in simple, essential actions. That life, at its core, is about persistence and adaptation. These tiny beings have perfected the art of living. Before we collect our drop of water and place it under the lens, let us set our intentions for this journey. We are not here to conduct rigorous scientific analysis or to memorize taxonomies and Latin names. We are here to witness, to appreciate. To find calm in observation, to reconnect with the wonder that made us fall in love with nature in the first place. Think of this as a meditation, a gentle safari through an alien landscape that happens to exist all around you at every moment. The creatures we will meet ask nothing of you. They do not know you are watching. They simply are, living their lives with a purity of purpose that we, in our complex modern existence, might sometimes envy. So settle in, take a deep breath, and prepare to see the familiar world transformed. One final thought before we begin. The microscopic world teaches us about perspective. When you are having a difficult day, when the problems of life seem overwhelming, remember that entire civilizations exist in the water on your windowsill, completely unaware of your concerns, living and dying and reproducing in their own dramas. This is not meant to diminish your experience, but rather to remind you that scale is relative. Your problems are real and valid, but they are also just one layer of reality among infinite others. The universe is full of worlds within worlds, each one as valid and complex as our own. Perhaps there is comfort in that. Perhaps there is peace in knowing that life finds a way at every scale, in every drop of water, in every moment. Now, let us go find our drop. We stand now at the edge of a quiet pond, early in the morning when the mist still clings to the surface of the water. This is one of the best places to find microscopic life, where fresh water meets organic matter, where sunlight penetrates and photosynthesis occurs, creating the base of a food chain that extends down to the smallest scales. We are looking for a sample that will give us the greatest diversity, the richest tapestry of life. The edges are often best where water meets soil or decaying plant matter. Here, nutrients accumulate, and where there are nutrients, there is life. We dip a clean glass slide into the water, just beneath the surface, and capture a single drop. That drop, we have collected a universe. As we walk back from the pond carrying our precious sample, it is worth considering what we are holding. This drop of water has a history. The water molecules themselves may have fallen as rain last week, or they may have been part of an ancient ocean millions of years ago, cycling through the hydrological system of Earth, evaporating and condensing in an endless dance. The living creatures in this drop have lineages that stretch back billions of years to a time when the only life on Earth existed at this microscopic scale. In a very real sense, we are about to witness evolution in action, to see the descendants of Earth's first colonizers going about their daily business. How remarkable is it that such profound continuity exists in something so seemingly insignificant as a drop of water? Now we are in our observation space, calm and quiet with our microscope ready. We place the drop on a glass slide and gently lower a cover slip over it. This simple action creates a thin film of water, compressed into a two-dimensional space that our lens can explore. We must be gentle, for we do not want to crush the very life we are hoping to observe. The cover slip settles, and the excess water spreads to the edges. Under the glass, an entire world awaits. We turn on the light source beneath the stage, and suddenly the drop is illuminated from below. Even before we look through the eyepiece, we can see movement, tiny shadows darting and drifting. Our hands steady, we bring our eye to the lens and begin to focus. The first thing you notice when looking through a microscope is how different everything appears. The world becomes abstract, shapes and movements that your brain struggles to interpret at first. There is a learning curve to seeing at this scale. Gradually, forms begin to resolve. That blurry mass is actually a piece of algae. That darting shadow is a swimming organism. That slowly flowing shape is something extending and contracting. As your eyes adjust and your brain learns this new language of light and shadow, the microscopic world comes into focus. It is like learning to see all over again. The human visual system evolved to spot predators on the savanna and identify ripe fruit in trees. It was never meant for this. And yet, here we are, adapting, understanding, witnessing. Let us pause here and appreciate the miracle of optics that makes this possible. Light, which normally travels in straight lines, can be bent by carefully shaped glass. This bending, called refraction, allows us to magnify tiny objects until they fill our field of vision. The microscope is an extension of our vision, a tool that allows us to transcend the biological limitations of our eyes. In that sense, it is no different from a telescope extending our view into the cosmos. Both instruments remind us that the universe contains far more than we can perceive unaided. Both humble us and elevate us simultaneously. We are limited beings with unlimited curiosity, and we build tools to satisfy that curiosity. What better use of human ingenuity than to reveal hidden beauty? Our drop of water is now perfectly positioned, illuminated, and magnified. We are looking at a field of view perhaps 0.5 millimeter across, but in that tiny space, we can see dozens of different objects. Some are clearly alive and moving. Others are still but structured, like the fragments of plant cells or the delicate shells of diatoms. There are particles of sediment, bits of organic matter, and yes, if we are patient, we will see the creatures we came to find. This is not a sterile, empty void. Place is not dead space. This is an ecosystem in miniature, as complex in its own way as a coral reef or a deciduous forest. Every surface is habitat. Every nutrient is contested. Every moment is survival. And through it all, there is an undeniable beauty that needs no justification beyond itself. There. Do you see it? In the upper left quadrant of our view, something is moving with obvious intention. It is translucent, almost ghost-like, and it flows more than swims. This is our first microorganism, and what a privilege it is to observe it. We do not know yet exactly what species this is, and for our purposes tonight, we do not need to. What matters is that we are watching life at its most fundamental level. This creature is a single cell, and yet within that cell is everything needed for existence. It can sense its environment, move toward food, avoid danger, and reproduce. All the complexity of life, miniaturized into a package smaller than the width of a human hair. How is this possible? No. How can something so small be so competent at the business of living? The answer lies in the elegance of cellular design. Even a single cell contains structures that perform specialized functions, not unlike organs in a multicellular body. There are membranes that control what enters and exits. There are energy-producing organelles that power all cellular activities. There is genetic material that stores the instructions for life. And there are systems for sensing the outside world and responding appropriately. All of this exists in a space so small that trillions of these cells could fit in a teaspoon. This is efficiency at a level we can barely comprehend. Nature, working with billions of years of trial and error, has created something very close to perfect. a machine made of proteins and lipids and nucleic acids that can maintain itself, repair itself, and make copies of itself. Let us watch this creature for a while and try to understand its behavior. It moves toward a cluster of smaller particles, perhaps bacteria or bits of organic matter. As it approaches, we see something remarkable. Part of its cell membrane begins to extend outward, forming a temporary projection called a pseudopod or false foot. This extension flows around the target particle, engulfing it completely. Within moments, the particle is inside the cell, enclosed in a bubble called a vacuole, where it will be digested and broken down into nutrients. This is called phagocytosis, and it is one of the most ancient feeding strategies on Earth. Before mouths evolved, before digestive tracts, there was this elegant simplicity. A cell reaches out, surrounds what it wants, and brings it inside. Billions of years old and still perfectly functional. What does this creature experience? Does it have any kind of awareness or sensation? These are questions science has not fully answered and perhaps can never fully answer. We know that these organisms respond to chemical signals, to light, to touch. We know they exhibit behaviors that could be called decision-making, choosing one direction over another, one food source over another. But whether there is any subjective experience, any inner life, remains a mystery. Perhaps it is better that way. Perhaps some mysteries should remain unsolved, leaving room for wonder and speculation. What we can say with certainty is that this creature wants to live in whatever way a single cell can want something. Its entire existence is oriented towards survival and reproduction. In that sense, it shares something fundamental with every living thing, including you and me. As we continue to scan our field of view, we notice that our drop of water is not uniformly populated. Certain areas are crowded with activity, while others seem almost empty. This makes sense when you consider that microorganisms, like all organisms, are drawn to resources. Where there is food, there is life. Where there is energy, there is competition. Even at this scale, ecology applies. Predator and prey relationships exist. Some organisms photosynthesize, creating energy from sunlight. Others feed on those photosynthesizers. Still others feed on the feeders, creating a food web that mirrors in miniature the larger ecosystems we are more familiar with. A drop of water is not a random collection of creatures. It is a community, structured by the same rules that structure all of life. There is something meditative about this observation. We are watching events unfold at a pace that demands patience. Unlike a nature documentary where action is condensed and edited for drama, here we must wait for things to happen in real time. A microorganism may take minutes to cross our field of view. A feeding event may unfold slowly, almost imperceptibly. This slowness is a gift. It forces us to be present, to pay attention, to notice details we might otherwise miss. In a world that constantly demands our attention with notifications and stimuli, the microscopic realm offers a respite. Here, nothing is urgent. Everything moves at its own pace. And in watching that pace, we might find our own breathing slowing, our own thoughts settling. This is why the microscopic world is perfect for meditation and sleep. Before we move deeper into our safari and meet specific creatures, let us take a moment to appreciate what we have already learned. We have learned that the invisible is not empty. We have learned that complexity can exist at the smallest scales. We have learned that life is tenacious and ubiquitous, finding footholds in every available niche. And we have learned that there is beauty in places we never thought to look. A drop of water, something most people would consider insignificant, has revealed itself to be a cosmos. If we can find this much wonder in something so small and overlooked, what else might we be missing in our daily lives? What other marvels surround us, waiting to be noticed? The microscope teaches us more than biology. It teaches us how to see. Now that we have oriented ourselves to the microscopic world, let us meet one of its most iconic inhabitants. The amoeba is perhaps the most recognizable microorganism known even to those who have never looked through a microscope. Its very name has entered common language, used to describe anything that lacks a fixed form. And indeed, what defines an amoeba is its remarkable shapelessness. Unlike many cells that have rigid walls or defined structures, the amoeba is almost liquid in its form. It is a bag of cytoplasm surrounded by a flexible membrane, and that flexibility gives it a kind of grace as it moves through its watery world. Watch now as one enters our field of view, flowing more than swimming, its boundaries constantly shifting and reforming. The way an amoeba moves is called amoeboid motion, and it is unlike any form of locomotion you are familiar with. There are no legs or fins or cilia here. Instead, the amoeba extends a part of itself in the direction it wants to go, creating a pseudopod or false foot. The cytoplasm inside the cell then flows into this extension, and the rest of the cell follows, like a wave moving through gel. It is movement without muscles, propulsion without engines. The amoeba is essentially flowing through space, reshaping itself constantly to navigate around obstacles and pursue food. Watching this process is hypnotic. The smooth, continuous motion has a quality that is almost artistic. This is life reducing movement to its most basic elements and finding elegance in simplicity. Inside the amoeba, if we look carefully, we can see various structures. There is a darker region that contains the nucleus, the control center where genetic information is stored. There are food vacuoles, small bubbles containing particles the amoeba has engulfed and is in the process of digesting. There may be a contractile vacuole, a structure that pumps excess water out of the cell to prevent it from bursting. And throughout the cytoplasm, we can see a constant churning motion called cytoplasmic streaming, where the contents of the cell circulate and mix. This is not a static, dead structure. This is a dynamic, living system, maintaining itself moment by moment through countless chemical reactions and physical processes. The amoeba is less like a machine and more like a tiny storm, a localized zone of organized complexity in a chaotic universe. The amoeba is hunting. We watch as it detects a smaller organism, perhaps a bacterium or a smaller protist. The detection happens through chemical sensing. Molecules released by the prey are picked up by receptors on the amoeba's membrane, and this triggers a response. The amoeba begins to move toward the target, extending pseudopods on either side of it. Slowly, inexorably, the prey is surrounded. The two pseudopods meet on the far side, fusing together and trapping the prey in a bubble that will become a food vacuole. The entire process takes several minutes and requires no brain, no nerves, no conscious thought. It is automatic and ancient, a behavior encoded in the very chemistry of the cell. And yet, watching it unfold, it is hard not to see intention and strategy. Amoebas belong to a larger group of organisms called protists, a wonderfully diverse category that includes everything from microscopic algae to parasites to the slime molds. What unites them is that they are eukaryotic, meaning their cells contain a nucleus and other membrane-bound organelles, but they are not animals, plants, or fungi. They are something else, something more ancient, something that represents earlier branches on the tree of life. In many ways, protists are living fossils, their basic design largely unchanged from forms that existed billions of years ago. When you look at an amoeba, you are looking back in time, seeing what the first complex cells might have looked like when they evolved from simpler bacterial ancestors. That connection to deep history is part of what makes the microscopic world so profound. Not all amoebas are free living in pond water. Some species are parasitic, including several that can infect humans and cause disease. But let us not dwell on that tonight. Our focus is on the beauty and wonder of life. and there is plenty of both to be found in the harmless species that live in freshwater environments. These amoebas play important ecological roles, consuming bacteria and helping to cycle nutrients through aquatic ecosystems. They are both predator and prey, feeding on smaller organisms while being fed upon by larger ones. They are decomposers, breaking down dead organic matter and returning its components to the water. In short, they are essential. The health of a pond or lake is reflected in the diversity and abundance of its microscopic inhabitants. When we protect water quality, we protect these tiny creatures, and in protecting them, we protect the entire ecosystem. As our amoeba slowly moves out of frame, engulfed prey safely contained in its food vacuole, we reflect on what we have witnessed. Here is an organism with no brain, no eyes, no mouth, and yet it is capable of finding food, avoiding danger, and reproducing successfully. It has been doing this for hundreds of millions of years, perhaps longer. The amoeba is proof that intelligence and complexity are not requirements for success. Sometimes, simplicity is the most elegant solution. Sometimes, flexibility and adaptability are worth more than specialization. In nature, there is no single correct way to live. There are countless strategies, each one working in its own context. The amoeba's strategy is to remain simple and flexible, to go with the flow, quite literally. Perhaps there is wisdom in that approach that we, in our complex lives, might learn from. If the amoeba is the graceful drifter of the microscopic world, then the paramecium is its athlete. Watch now as one of these extraordinary creatures swims into view, moving with obvious speed and purpose. The paramecium is shaped like a tiny slipper or submarine, streamlined for movement through water. But what truly sets it apart is its covering of cilia, thousands of microscopic hair-like structures that beat in coordinated waves to propel the organism forward. Imagine if you could row a boat using thousands of tiny oars, all working in perfect synchrony, and you begin to understand how a paramecium moves. It is not flowing like an amoeba. It is swimming, truly swimming, with a level of control and agility that seems almost impossible for a single cell. The cilia that cover the paramecium's body are marvels of nanoengineering. Each one is a complex structure made of proteins arranged in a precise pattern. At the base of each cilium is a structure called a basal body that anchors it to the cell and controls its beating. The cilia do not all beat randomly. They beat in coordinated waves that sweep across the surface of the cell like wind moving through a field of wheat. This coordination is achieved through mechanical connections between adjacent cilia and through chemical signals within the cell. The result is a propulsion system that is remarkably efficient. A paramecium can swim many body lengths per second, an impressive feat when you consider it is moving through a medium that, at its scale, is as thick as honey would be to us. Water is not the same at different scales. Paramecia feed in a different way than amoebas. Instead of engulfing food particles from any part of their surface, Paramecia have a specialized feeding structure called an oral groove. This is a depression in one side of the cell that leads to a deeper chamber. Cilia lining this groove beat in a specific pattern that creates a current, drawing water and food particles into the oral groove. Bacteria and other small organisms are swept along this current and into the cell, where they are packaged into food vacuoles and digested. It is a more sophisticated feeding system than simple phagocytosis, suggesting a higher level of cellular organization. The paramecium has regions that perform different functions, almost like organs. For a single cell, this is remarkable complexity. Watch how the paramecium navigates through our drop of water. It does not simply swim in straight lines. It rotates as it moves, spiraling through the liquid like a tiny football in flight. This rotation is caused by the slightly asymmetric beating of its cilia. When the paramecium encounters an obstacle or an unpleasant stimulus, It can reverse the beating of its cilia and swim backwards for a short distance before changing direction and swimming forward again. This avoidance reaction is automatic, triggered by chemical or physical signals detected by the cell membrane. Again, we see behavior that seems intelligent and purposeful, yet requires no nervous system or brain. The paramecium is responding to its environment using nothing more than chemistry and physics, but those responses are effective enough to keep it alive and reproducing. Paramecia have two types of nuclei, which is unusual and fascinating. There is a large macronucleus that controls daily cellular operations, and one or more smaller micronuclei that are involved in reproduction. When a paramecium reproduces, it usually does so through simple cell division, splitting itself into two daughter cells. But Paramecia can also engage in sexual reproduction through a process called conjugation. Two Paramecia come together, connect through a bridge, and exchange genetic material. They do not produce offspring from this exchange. Instead, each paramecium incorporates the new genetic information and then separates, both having been genetically altered by the encounter. This allows genetic diversity without the need for separate sexes or specialized reproductive cells. It is yet another example of how life finds creative solutions to fundamental problems. The paramecium belongs to the ciliate group, one of the most diverse and successful groups of protists. Ciliates can be found in almost every aquatic environment on Earth, from fresh water to salt water, from tropical to polar regions. They come in an astonishing variety of shapes and sizes, but all share the characteristic covering of cilia. Some are free, swimming like our paramecium. Others attach to surfaces and use their cilia to create feeding currents. Still others are specialized predators with complex structures for capturing prey. The ciliates demonstrate that the single-cell body plan is not a limitation. With enough evolutionary time and selective pressure, a single cell can become almost anything. The diversity of form and function within the ciliates rivals that of any group of multicellular organisms. A single cell can be a universe of possibilities. As we continue our exploration, we notice something new and quite different from what we have seen so far. It is larger than the protists, more complex in structure, and it seems to be spinning in place. This is a rotifer, sometimes called a wheel animal, and it is not a single cell. Rotifers are microscopic animals, complete with specialized tissues and organs, all contained in a body smaller than a grain of sand. What we are seeing is one of the most elegant creatures in the microscopic realm, performing a dance that has captivated observers since they were first discovered centuries ago. The rotifer spins because of its corona, a ring of cilia around its mouth that beats so rapidly it creates the illusion of rotating wheels. Hence the name wheelbearer. Let us watch this tiny dancer and marvel at its complexity. The rotifer's corona serves multiple purposes. The beating cilia create water currents that both propel the organism through space and sweep food particles toward its mouth. It is propulsion and feeding combined in one elegant structure. Watch how the rotifer uses these currents to position itself in the water, hovering in place or slowly drifting to a new location. The control it exhibits is remarkable. These are not random movements, but purposeful adjustments to its position. Despite having no eyes, the rotifer responds to light. Despite having no nose, it can detect chemicals in the water. It has sensory structures that allow it to perceive and respond to its environment. For an animal measured in microns, it has an impressive array of capabilities. Size does not determine sophistication. Inside the rotifer's transparent body, we can see its internal organs. There is a mastax, a muscular pharynx containing hard jaws that grind food into smaller particles. These jaws are constantly working, chomping away at the bacteria and algae the rotifer has collected. Behind the mastax is a simple stomach and intestine where digestion occurs and nutrients are absorbed. There are no lungs or gills because the rotifer is small enough to absorb oxygen directly through its body surface. There is no circulatory system because substances can diffuse throughout the tiny body quickly enough without need for blood vessels. The rotifer demonstrates an important biological principle that as organisms get smaller, they can dispense with certain organ systems because simple diffusion becomes sufficient. Simplicity emerges again as an advantage of small size. Rotifers are incredibly resilient creatures. Many species can survive complete desiccation, drying out entirely and entering a state of suspended animation. In this state, they can survive extremes of temperature, radiation, and chemical exposure that would kill most other organisms. Years or even decades later, when water returns, the rotifer can revive and resume its normal activities as if nothing had happened. This ability, called anhydrobiosis or life without water, is almost miraculous. It allows rotifers to colonize ephemeral habitats like temporary ponds and rainwater puddles. When the habitat dries up, the rotifers simply wait, preserved in a state between life and death until conditions improve. Such adaptations remind us that life is far more flexible and tenacious than we often imagine. Evolution finds solutions to problems we would consider impossible. Many rotifers are females. In fact, some species reproduce entirely without males through a process called parthenogenesis, where unfertilized eggs develop into new individuals. When males do exist in these species, they are often smaller and simpler than females, lacking a digestive system entirely and living only long enough to mate. This unusual reproductive strategy is yet another example of the diverse ways life can organize itself. There is no single correct way to reproduce, no universal rule. Different organisms have evolved different solutions, each one working in its particular ecological context. The rotifer's approach of facultative parthenogenesis, where reproduction can occur with or without males depending on conditions, gives it flexibility. In stable times, cloning oneself is efficient. In changing times, sexual reproduction generates the genetic diversity needed to adapt. We watch as our rotifer extends its foot, a posterior projection that ends in toes, and uses it to anchor itself to a piece of debris. Now attached, it can feed more efficiently, creating a stronger current without being swept away. The rotifer's body is encased in a cuticle, a semi-rigid outer layer that provides protection and support. This is not the rigid exoskeleton of an insect, but rather a flexible armor that allows movement while preventing the soft internal tissues from being damaged. Some rotifers have this cuticle modified into elaborate spines and plates, looking like microscopic knights in armor. Others are soft-bodied and more worm-like. The diversity of form within the rotifer group is impressive, with over 2,000 known species and probably many more yet to be discovered. Each drop of water may contain species unknown to science, lives no human has ever witnessed. As the rotifer releases its grip and floats away, spiraling gently through the water with its corona still beating, we are reminded of why these creatures are called dancers. There is an aesthetic quality to their movements that transcends mere function. They are beautiful in motion, hypnotic to watch, calming in their presence. For centuries, naturalists have been captivated by rotifers, spending hours at their microscopes observing these tiny ballerinas of the microscopic realm. That tradition continues tonight as we watch, mesmerized by a creature that most people will never see, living a life that most people will never imagine. The rotifer asks nothing of us. It does not know we exist, but in watching it, we are enriched. We have seen grace at a scale we never expected to find it. We have witnessed complexity in a package tinier than we thought possible. And we have been reminded once again that wonder is everywhere if we only know where to look. Our attention now turns to what might be the most beautiful structures in the microscopic world. Scattered throughout our water drop are objects that look almost crystalline, with intricate geometric patterns and perfect symmetry. These are diatoms, single-celled algae that live inside shells of glass. Yes, glass, or more precisely, silicon dioxide, the same material that makes up sand and quartz. Diatoms extract silicon from the water and use it to construct protective shells called frustules, and these frustules are works of art. Each species has its own distinctive pattern, carved into the glass with such precision that diatoms were once used to test the quality of microscope lenses. If you could resolve the fine details of a diatom's shell, your optics were excellent. Let us examine these living jewels more closely and appreciate the artistry of evolution. The diatom's frustule is composed of two halves that fit together like a petri dish or a pillbox, one half slightly overlapping the other. The glass is perforated with countless tiny pores arranged in precise patterns. These pores allow nutrients to enter and waste products to exit while keeping the delicate living cell inside protected. The level of detail in these structures is astonishing. The pores are measured in nanometers, smaller than the wavelength of visible light. And yet, the diatom creates this intricate architecture using biochemical processes we are only beginning to understand. How does a single cell, with no brain or blueprint, construct something so precisely geometric? It is a question that humbles us and reminds us how much we still have to learn about life's capabilities. Inside its glass house, the diatom is photosynthesizing, using chloroplasts to capture light energy and convert it into chemical energy. Diatoms are responsible for producing a significant fraction of Earth's oxygen. These tiny organisms, individually invisible to the naked eye, collectively generate somewhere between 20 and 40% of the oxygen produced by photosynthesis each year. That means that 1 in every 4 or 5 breaths you take comes from diatoms. These microscopic architects, these single cells in glass shells, are keeping you alive. They form the base of aquatic food webs, feeding everything from tiny zooplankton to the largest whales. They regulate carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere. When they die, their glass shells rain down to the ocean floor, forming vast deposits called diatomaceous earth. Every part of their existence has global significance. Diatoms come in two basic forms. There are centric diatoms, which are radially symmetrical like a wheel or a pill, and pennate diatoms, which are elongated and bilaterally symmetrical like a boat or a feather. Both forms are beautiful, but in different ways. The centric diatoms have patterns that radiate from a central point, creating mandala-like designs. The pennate diatoms have patterns that flow along their length, often with a central line called a raphe that the diatom uses for movement. Yes, some diatoms can move, gliding along surfaces using a mechanism that involves secreting mucilage through the raphe. This movement is slow and mysterious, another reminder that even the seemingly simple protists and algae have capabilities we are still working to fully understand. The microscopic world does not give up its secrets easily. Among the diatoms and other debris in our water drop, we also find various types of green algae. Some are single cells, spherical or oval, bright green with their chloroplasts clearly visible. Others are colonial, with many cells connected together in chains or filaments or hollow spheres. One of the most common is a genus called Spirogyra, named for the spiral arrangement of its chloroplast ribbons. These filamentous algae often form the green slime you see in ponds and slow streams, but under the microscope they are beautiful, with their chloroplasts coiling through each cell like springs. These are the aquatic cousins of the plants you know from land, photosynthesizing and growing, creating the oxygen and organic matter that support all other life in the water. Without algae, aquatic ecosystems would collapse. With them, they flourish. There is something profoundly satisfying about observing these photosynthetic organisms. Perhaps it is because we can see the mechanism of life support so clearly. Light enters the cell, strikes the chloroplasts, and through a complex series of chemical reactions, energy is captured and stored. Carbon dioxide is consumed and oxygen is released. In these tiny cells, The same process that makes forests green and crops grow is happening at a miniature scale. Photosynthesis is one of the most important biochemical processes on Earth, and it evolved first in microscopic organisms like these. Billions of years ago, the ancestors of modern algae began capturing light energy, and that innovation changed our planet forever, filling the atmosphere with oxygen and making complex life possible. Every breath you take, every moment you live, is owed to microscopic organisms that learn to harvest sunlight. That is worth contemplating. If we are very fortunate, and if our water sample came from a place with moss or lichen nearby, we might encounter one of the most remarkable animals in existence. Moving into our field of view now is a creature that looks like it belongs in a science fiction film, an 8-legged lumbering being that seems almost prehistoric in its design. This is a tardigrade, also known as a water bear or moss piglet, and it is both adorable and nearly indestructible. Tardigrades are multicellular animals, complete with a nervous system, digestive tract, and muscles, all contained in a body barely half a millimeter long. What makes them legendary among biologists is their survival abilities. Tardigrades can withstand temperatures from near absolute zero to well above boiling. They can survive radiation levels that would kill almost any other organism. They can live without water for decades. They have even survived in the vacuum of space. The secret to the tardigrade's resilience lies in its ability to enter a state called cryptobiosis, or hidden life. When conditions become harsh, when water disappears or temperatures become extreme, the tardigrade can retract its legs, expel most of the water from its body, and curl into a dormant form called a ton. In this state, its metabolism drops to less than 1% of normal. It is not quite alive and not quite dead, existing in suspension until conditions improve. The tardigrade can remain in this state for years or even decades. When water returns or temperatures moderate, the tardigrade absorbs water, unfurls, and walks away as if nothing happened. This is survival taken to its logical extreme. The tardigrade has essentially become immortal through its ability to pause life indefinitely. If we could do the same, what journeys might we undertake? Watch how the tardigrade moves, each leg gripping and releasing in turn, pulling its plump body forward in a slow but steady gait. There is something endearing about this motion, something that makes the tardigrade seem almost friendly despite its alien appearance. The legs end in claws that grip whatever surface the tardigrade is traversing, whether that surface is a grain of sand, a strand of algae, or the glass of our microscope slide. Tardigrades are found nearly everywhere on Earth where there is at least some moisture. They live in marine sediments and freshwater lakes, in soil and leaf litter, in the gutters of roofs and the films of water on plants. They are cosmopolitan survivors, thriving in niches that more specialized organisms cannot tolerate. Their very existence expands our understanding of what is possible for life. The tardigrade has a simple but complete body plan. There is a mouth at the front with a pair of stylets, sharp projections that can pierce plant cells or smaller animals, allowing the tardigrade to suck out the contents. There is a muscular pharynx that creates suction, pulling food into a simple digestive tract that runs the length of the body. There are 4 pairs of ganglia that serve as a brain and coordinate movement and behavior. There are muscles attached to the body wall that allow the legs to move and the body to flex. It is a miniature animal, complete in all essential ways, just scaled down to a size that makes it invisible to casual observation. The tardigrade reminds us that complexity is not about size. Some of the most sophisticated organisms on Earth are also among the smallest. Tardigrades have been sent into space multiple times, exposed to the vacuum and radiation, and brought back to Earth alive. They have been frozen and thawed, desiccated and rehydrated, subjected to pressures that would crush most organisms, and they survive. Scientists are studying tardigrade proteins to understand how they protect cells from damage. There is hope that these proteins might one day help preserve human cells and tissues, perhaps even making long-term space travel possible. The tardigrade, this tiny creature from pond water and moss, might hold keys to humanity's future among the stars. That is a profound thought. An animal smaller than the period at the end of this sentence might be our guide to the cosmos. It is yet another reminder that we should pay attention to the small and overlooked, for they may have lessons to teach us. As we watch our tardigrade lumber out of view, perhaps to explore another region of our microscopic landscape, we reflect on what these creatures represent. They are proof that life can adapt to almost any condition. They are demonstrations of evolutionary engineering at its finest. They are reminders that toughness comes in the smallest packages, and they are symbols of resilience, surviving when survival seems impossible, persisting when persistence seems futile. In a universe that seems indifferent to life, tardigrades are defiant. They will outlast most other organisms. They will probably outlast our species. Long after we are gone, tardigrades will still be walking through moss and lichen, entering their tons when necessary, waking when conditions allow, continuing the ancient business of being alive. There is something both humbling and comforting in that thought. Our drop of water has proven to be a treasure trove of life and wonder. We have seen protists flowing and swimming, rotifers dancing and feeding, diatoms building glass palaces, and tardigrades marching through it all with their indomitable spirit. Each organism we have encountered is a success story, a solution to the problem of existence that has worked for millions or billions of years. Each one has something to teach us about adaptation, resilience, and the sheer creativity of evolution. The microscopic world is not a lesser world or a simpler world. It is a parallel universe of complexity and beauty that exists alongside our own, unnoticed by most people, most of the time. Oh, but now you have seen it. Oh, you know it is there. And that knowledge changes everything. You will never look at a puddle or a pond or a drop of water the same way again. As we have explored our drop of water, we have focused on individual organisms, meeting them one by one and learning their stories. But now, let us step back and consider the bigger picture. This drop of water is not just a collection of separate creatures living in isolation. It is an ecosystem, a web of relationships and interactions as complex as any rainforest or savanna. Every organism here is connected to every other, either directly or indirectly. The algae produce oxygen and organic compounds through photosynthesis. The bacteria consume organic matter and cycle nutrients. The protists eat the bacteria. The rotifers eat the protists and algae. The tardigrades eat whatever they can pierce and suck. And when any of these organisms dies, it becomes food for decomposers, and its constituent elements are recycled back into the system. And nothing is wasted. Everything is connected. This is ecology at its most fundamental level. The principles that govern this drop of water are the same principles that govern all ecosystems. Energy flows from sunlight through photosynthesis into the bodies of autotrophs, the organisms that make their own food. That energy then passes to heterotrophs, the organisms that must consume others to obtain energy. At each step, some energy is lost as heat, and so the flow of energy is one way, from sun to producers to consumers to decomposers. But nutrients, the actual atoms and molecules that make up living bodies, cycle endlessly. A carbon atom in an algae cell today might be in a bacteria tomorrow, in an amoeba next week, released as carbon dioxide the week after, and absorbed by a new algae cell to start the cycle again. The water drop is a closed system for matter, but an open system for energy. Understanding this is understanding the basics of how all ecosystems function. The diversity we see in our drop of water is not random. Each organism occupies a specific niche, a role in the ecosystem that no other organism fills in quite the same way. The amoeba's niche is that of a mobile phagocytic predator flowing through the water and engulfing bacteria. The paramecium's niche is that of a filter-feeding swimmer creating currents and straining out food particles. The rotifer's niche might be as a specialist on certain types of algae. The diatom's niche is as a photosynthetic producer, building glass shells to protect itself while capturing light. And so on. This partitioning of resources, where different species use slightly different foods or hunt in slightly different ways or occupy slightly different microhabitats, is what allows so many species to coexist. If every organism had exactly the same niche, competition would be intense and most would be driven to extinction. Diversity requires specialization. Competition is real in the microscopic world. Resources are limited, and every organism is trying to survive and reproduce. The cooperation exists too. Some protists harbor photosynthetic algae within their cells, providing the algae with protection and mobility while receiving sugars produced by photosynthesis. This is symbiosis, a mutually beneficial relationship between different species. Some bacteria live on the surfaces of larger organisms, breaking down compounds the host cannot digest and making nutrients available. The microbiome of a rotifer or tardigrade might be as important to its health as the microbiome in your gut is to yours. Even at the smallest scales, life is not a simple war of all against all. It is a complex tapestry of competition and cooperation, predation and mutualism, conflict and coexistence. The full picture is always more nuanced than any simple narrative. The stability of this ecosystem depends on balance. If one population grows too large, it will deplete its resources and crash. But before that happens, predators that feed on that population will increase in number, bringing the population back down. This is predator-prey dynamics, one of the fundamental patterns in ecology. The populations oscillate over time, never quite reaching equilibrium, but never spinning completely out of control either. The system self-regulates through feedback loops. High prey numbers lead to high predator numbers, lead to low prey numbers, lead to low predator numbers, lead to high prey numbers again. It is a dance that has been going on for billions of years in every ecosystem on Earth. Our drop of water participates in this ancient rhythm, each organism playing its part without knowledge of the larger pattern it helps create. What happens to our drop of water over time? If we could watch it for days or weeks, we would see succession. The initial community of organisms would gradually change as some species thrive and others decline. Early colonizers, usually fast-growing bacteria and algae, would be replaced by slower-growing but more competitive species. Predator populations would rise and fall in response to prey availability. New species might arrive, blown in on the wind as dormant spores or cysts. Old species might die out if conditions change even slightly. The community is never static. It is always in flux, always responding to environmental pressures and internal dynamics. And yet, despite constant change, certain patterns remain. There are always producers, always consumers, always decomposers. The players change, but the roles remain. This is the paradox of ecosystems, constantly changing yet fundamentally stable. Our journey through the microscopic world is drawing to a close. But before we return to our normal scale of existence, let us reflect on what we have learned. We have seen that size is no measure of complexity or importance. We have seen that beauty exists at every scale, from galaxies to drops of water. We have seen that life is far more diverse and creative than we often imagine. We have seen that the invisible world is not empty, but teeming. And perhaps most importantly, we have seen that we are connected to all of this, that the same fundamental processes that animate an amoeba or a tardigrade also animate us. We are not separate from nature, observing it from outside. We are nature, made of the same stuff, following the same rules, participating in the same ancient dance of life. Think about the atoms that make up your body. Many of them were once part of other organisms. That carbon in your cells might have been in a plant last year, in the soil before that, in the atmosphere before that, and in an ancient ocean before that. The water molecules in your body have been through countless organisms over billions of years. You are made of recycled materials, and one day those materials will be recycled again. You are a temporary arrangement of atoms borrowed from the universe for a brief span of time. So is the amoeba, so is the rotifer, so is every living thing. We are all fleeting patterns in the endless flow of matter and energy. This might sound depressing, but it need not be. There is something beautiful in knowing you are part of a continuity that stretches from the beginning of life to its end, whenever that may come. The microscopic world teaches us humility. For all our intelligence and technology, for all our cities and civilizations, we are just one type of organism among millions. We are not the pinnacle of evolution or the purpose of creation. We are participants in a story much larger than ourselves. The bacteria were here billions of years before us and will almost certainly be here billions of years after we are gone. The protists have survived multiple mass extinctions and will likely survive many more. We are newcomers, barely a footnote in the history of life on Earth. And yet, we are also remarkable. We are the organism that has learned to see microorganisms. We are the species that studies and appreciates and tries to understand. We are nature, become conscious of itself. That is worth celebrating even as we maintain humility. What we do with the knowledge we have gained tonight is up to us. Perhaps it will simply be a pleasant memory, a relaxing hour spent exploring a hidden world. Perhaps it will change how we see the water we drink and the ponds we pass. Perhaps it will inspire us to learn more, to look deeper, to ask bigger questions. Perhaps it will remind us to slow down and pay attention to the details, because the universe rewards careful observation. Or perhaps it will simply help us sleep, the gentle images and calming narration working their way into our dreams. Any of these outcomes is valuable. There is no wrong way to appreciate beauty and wonder. The microscopic world does not demand anything from us. It simply exists, waiting to be discovered by anyone who cares to look. As we metaphorically step back from our microscope, the drop of water returns to being just a drop of water. The organisms within continue their lives, unaware they were ever observed. The amoeba continues hunting. The paramecium continues swimming. The rotifer continues spinning. The tardigrade continues its indomitable march. All of it happening in a space smaller than a grain of rice, invisible to anyone not specifically looking for it. And yet, knowing it is there changes everything. You cannot unsee what you have seen tonight. Every body of water now contains infinite worlds. Every surface is habitat. Every drop is cosmos. This shift in perspective, this awakening to the hidden layers of reality, is perhaps the greatest gift the microscope can give us. Not just knowledge, but a new way of seeing. In closing, let us remember that scale is relative. To a human, a drop of water is tiny and insignificant. To an amoeba, that same drop is an entire world. To an atom, even the amoeba is incomprehensibly vast. There is no absolute scale, no privileged perspective. The universe contains structures at every magnitude, from subatomic particles to superclusters of galaxies, and each scale is as real and valid as any other. We happen to exist at the scale we do, able to perceive some things directly and needing tools to perceive others. But all of it, from the smallest to the largest, is part of one unified reality. When we explore the microscopic world, we are not leaving our world behind. We are discovering parts of it that were always there, always interacting with us, always essential to our existence. We are coming home to a fuller understanding of the place we have always inhabited. Our microscopic safari has come to an end, but the world we explored continues, unchanged by our observation, eternal in its tiny magnificence. The next time you touch water, remember what lives there. The next time you see a pond, imagine the invisible civilizations thriving beneath its surface. The next time you feel overwhelmed by the scale of the universe, remember that universes exist at every scale, and you are always at the center of your own. Thank you for joining this journey into the hidden world. May the memory of what you have seen bring you peace, wonder, and a deeper appreciation for the miracle of life in all its forms, no matter how small. Sleep well, dream deeply, and when you wake, see the world with new eyes.